Well, when I'm not, I haven't thought, I know we're waiting for others to come, so we're chit chatting, but
One more.
um, I, I was trying to think, I'm not so great at mission statements, but I was trying to think about kind of categories of actions. Um, and I came up with four really broad categories.
Okay.
And what you've suggested is one of them, which is educate ourselves. Um, the second sort of broad category is it has to do with forming relationships, and that can be thought of as in terms of inside the neighborhood association, but also kind of across, so the bonding and bridging both.
Mhm.
And then the third category is the one that I have a particular fondness for in my heart, because I think of it as low hanging fruit. Um, and it's where I end up putting a lot of the work that I do, which is what can we do as a committee without necessarily needing to seek huge neighborhood consensus. I mean, maybe there's executive committee buy-in and stuff like that, but um, what are small things that can be done that subtly start to alter the culture of our of the organization and the tenor of how things happen? And so but they're like little things, and I'll give a few examples of those in a second, because like I said, that's where I tend. And then I would say the fourth are sort of the big things that require way more buy-in from the association as a whole, and are a more of a statement that requires some sort of consensus inside the association overall to proceed. And I mean, for example, the statue idea that you put out there might be something that would require a lot more work and neighborhood buy-in and partnership and a bunch of different things. Two examples of kind of my friendly low-hanging fruit. Um, I've I've been given, and I have to go back and find them, two lists of things that resources that people can call to solve common issues that arise in day-to-day life, other than calling the police. And it doesn't mean that if you're afraid for your safety, you shouldn't call the police. It just means that maybe certain situations with difficult people or people having a mental health crisis or whatever it is could bear other types of interventions. And I was thinking about the idea of, I mean, I have these two lists I've been given, I haven't really vetted them, but the notion of vetting them and then publishing them in a newsletter so that everyone can have them is a nice low hanging fruit.
Mhm.
Um, you know, maybe we don't need the police for everything, and maybe everything doesn't have to involve someone with a gun. Not that police use guns all the time, but
Oh yeah,
maybe they're more appropriate interventions.
I'm all for that.
And then the other one, and given Tamara, given your particular interest in First Peoples or Native American history, which is something that I really am interested in too, but haven't, only know more broadly and haven't really dug in kind of the same way, is I've heard this done just starting meetings, acknowledging the heritage of the land that we stand on, um, and including the first people and early tribes who were here. And it's not just our neighborhood, because I mean, it was many, I don't know that ours was the ancestral home of any specific limited one tribe camped right here, but it was more the ancestral homes of a number of nations and bands and groups that were moved throughout the Portland area. So, I mean, that would be something that could be initiated in a small way at executive committee meetings. And if people fall out of their chairs, it's a way to get a reading. But I mean, and then maybe just ask, what do you think about starting a neighborhood meeting that way? If we ever have them again, if a lot of people show up again. But just, I mean, those are low hanging fruit that send messages, but not everyone has to agree.
Nice.
So anyway, that's sort of my idea for a way to make this a little more manageable, is to think in terms of like globs of things. And Ed, I know you're itching to talk, so I'll be quiet.
No, I'm not. So referencing the concept that you put forth about someone other than police addressing a lot of situations, Ron Wyden, so there's a program that's been active in Eugene for over a decade. It's called Cahoots.
Yeah, I know all about it. I'm
Okay.
very familiar.
So it sounds what you're suggesting is the similar.
No, what I'm suggesting is we don't have Cahoots here, but what I have is a written list of places. I'm looking for it here. I've got it somewhere in my paper. A list that could be published in the newsletter. It's not just one organization to call like Cahoots.
Oh, okay.
But a list of resources that would require a little bit of effort on the individual. It's not just call Cahoots, which would be wonderful if we had Cahoots, but we don't.
Right. Well, Wyden's introduced it in the legislation in Washington, but that'll be a long time before it becomes real. But yeah, the newsletter, and we can also put it on the website. Add the list as a source. But so Jennifer forgot about Beanie. I texted her and she's making dinner and she said go on without her.
Okay. All right.
So, I don't know about Lynn. I'll try her.
Well, why don't we go ahead with the introductions and just a little bit about our background so we can know a little bit about who we are. I'm Tamara DeRitter, and I am second generation from Belgium on my father's side. On my mother's side, I'm Scotch-Irish. And so I'm just a kind of a mix of everybody. But I moved out here in '85 to escape persecution as being a lesbian. And it was a trial even to buy this house because we put the money down and then they decided, oh no, we didn't want to sell it to two women. So they put it back out on the market, which apparently in Oregon they can do so, at least in Portland, which I think is, again, bad practice, but nonetheless it's there. And so we ended up having to pay another $25,000 more. But luckily we had the cash to do that. It was, anyway, the rest is the long drawn out history of trying to assimilate into a very polite culture that won't necessarily accept you. So that's my claim to fame. And here I am as a land use planner. How about you, Andre?
Let's see. My roots are in Louisiana. My family and I identify as white. And I mean, my brothers traced our heritage back to Europe and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's kind of where it is. I'm also a planner, trained as a planner, as you know. And I was trying to think, I actually went and looked. I started my first I first started going to neighborhood meetings, and I'm talking about 4 a week in the evenings in 1982. And so I've had a pretty intense diet through my life of that. I managed the neighborhood association program for the city of Roanoke back in the Virginia in the 1980s, and spent a lot of time in African American church basements, which was a wonderful experience, and so forth and so on.
Yes.
Grew up in the South, and
In Louisiana?
actually no, Florida.
I grew up in Tennessee.
Yeah, and have spent a lot of my professional life working on overcoming or dealing with racial barriers between people. I do a fair amount of consulting work for the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, have written guides on inclusive communities and crap like that. So, and went back, ended up getting a PhD in my 50s, and teach at Portland State, and my area is housing policy.
Okay.
I'm sort of semi-retired. The name of my consulting firm is Common Works Consulting, and it's me.
Yes.
But if you're curious about who I am and the work I do, my website, while it hasn't been updated in 7 years, actually has a good smattering of some of the kinds of crazy things I do.
Fun.
Worked a fair amount with Lisa Bates, folks like that.
Oh, I love Lisa.
And I'm on just wrapped up some work on a state advisory committee with DLCD on creating housing housing production strategies, kind of the thing that was the new, essentially the rulemaking that's going on around the state laws that were passed.
Good.
So anyway, we're just wrapping up that work. Anyway, so this is an important issue to me.
Yeah.
And I can't really do evening meetings. I'm so burned out on them that I will not be helpful. I will be angry. So I'm happy to do things on the side or help otherwise. And
Great.
I certainly don't want to preclude other people from belonging due to my peccadillo.
Great. Well, you come with a wealth of information and connections too. So I really appreciate that. Sweet. How about you, Ed?
Just Northern European, and no background in land use planning or sociology or anything like that. So I'm just a guy who worked and raised a family, and
Oh, come on.
and that's it. So I think so. Jennifer, she's not going to join us. They're getting ready to go on vacation tomorrow. So I don't know. Honestly, I think one of the first things we need to address is if this effort at this point in time is feasible. I know Andrea has been very clear that she doesn't have the energy to do it. Tamara, you're swamped with work, and this isn't. I've never been inclined to pursue academic type activities. I have a college degree, but it was hard to, it's not my style of learning. So it's not something that I'm going to lead. I'll just be straightforward about that. So if we don't have a leader, I know there's a lot of good information that people have, but we're going to need a catalyst, in my view, to bring this thing together. And again, this may not be the time. So I don't know. I wanted to get that out before we expended a lot of energy on mission statements and that sort of process.
Right.
So,
Well, you know, in response just to that particular point is we're at the very tail end of summer. And so I know I'm wanting to use as much available time as possible to get outside. You know, so maybe if we pick this back up in October, it would be a better fit for folks because then you're spending more time inside. It's getting darker earlier, that type of thing. So timing is an issue. I might have more time then than I do now because I certainly will have at least one project done by then. But then I'll be looking for more work. So, you know, it just keeps a roll.
do we want to extend invitation to members of the neighborhood?
That's what I'm thinking.
You know, maybe in the newsletter, the October newsletter, have a feature article that defines or explains that we want to engage the neighborhood in this process. We can share the resources that Andre has provided already. And then I know Sherry has a friend who's
Andre knows.
Greta. You know Greta, Andre. And Sherry was chatting with Greta about it, and she was pretty enthused. And there's probably a good number of other folks,
right,
who would really like to be part of this process. Jennifer did say the friend she had mentioned has not replied to her, so
okay.
She's speculating that maybe that person isn't going to join, at least now. But I think maybe more of a structured approach and outreach to the neighborhood, because there are people. I mean, I admit it, I don't have any talent in this area, but there may be a lot of people who this is in their wheelhouse,
right,
that we could engage and could do a very good job of leading us into this and then through the process.
I agree.
Yeah.
I know just enough to get myself stuck somewhere and say, I'm in the spin cycle here, help.
Yeah. So I hate to, be a buzzkill, but
it's very important to be upfront and honest, and that's why I said I don't have the capacity right now for this to be, me to be the lead on this, and I don't necessarily have the pathway, by which we would best go.
But it's good to plant the seed and get something started, I think, and maybe, like you say, shelve it or, put it on hold until October, and then maybe people will be thinking about some things. And
yeah. How about you, Sherry? What's your background?
My family has been here. My mother's family came to the East Coast in the 1600s. They came from England. Came as indentured, worked as indentured servants in Virginia.
What's your family's name? Last name?
Well, her name, my maiden name is Jones.
Okay.
And my mother's maiden name is Connett. So that's the family that came. They had some land, and there was a conflict going on, and they wanted to get out of there, and so they left their property and came to Virginia. And anyway, the rest, my dad's side of the family came through Canada. They've been there for a long time. So I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, which is a very, very, very white town. And we had a handful of Black families in the town. and some went to school with us, and I don't know how they got along with people. They were nice, as far as I knew. And I have had a lifelong interest in Indian history, as you do, and wondered what tribes lived in the Willamette Valley. There was no education about that. And in fourth grade, when we studied Native Americans, it was all about the Vancouver Island tribes, and Washington tribes. So it was a piece of education that was put together by somebody outside of the state. And it kind of made me wonder, there was a kind of a black hole there so anyway, I think it's good to acknowledge the people who lived here before us, and there were thriving societies. I'm reading a book now that's really called 1491. So it was history before Columbus came.
Mm-hmm.
So it's surprising.
So Tamara,
Yeah.
Speaking to maybe outreach to the neighborhood, the October general meeting, I extended right after the last board meeting invitations to Shelley Davidson at St. Rose, who's the school's outreach person. She's the person that's dealt with us before, and also to Baker over at Albina Head Start. And I have not gotten a reply from either one of them. So, and I don't know how Jennifer's done with Rose City Park School or Roseway Heights, but that was tentatively our feature program for the general meeting.
Have you tried Elaine Harrison at Head Start?
Well, I know I've talked to her in the past, but she's with the umbrella organization. Could reach out to her.
I know her pretty well.
Do you?
So, yeah, I mean, she wanted to name the community garden after me because I put in so much effort to get that going. And we met at that school every time, and she sometimes would come in and join our meetings. So,
okay. Well, yeah, I don't know if you want to reach out to her. Maybe that's just summer and they're not, although our neighbor Megan, Andre knows her, she works at St. Rose and she goes there every morning. So I haven't had a chance to ask Megan if Shelley's in the office, and they just left for Montana today, taking their kids to school in Helena. But we might want to think maybe about this as a general meeting item to as a backup if the school concept doesn't come to fruition. I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out because that was a concern of mine. I did want to mention it to you.
Yeah. I think that would be a great backup. I think also at least mentioning this at the general meeting and in the newsletter. One thing that I've been schooled about by a Native American principal that I interviewed for one of my contracts is that just saying certain things at the very beginning of the meeting, honoring the previous inhabitants may or may not be appropriate, and that you have to do your homework. And then as a group, then determine whether or not that would be appropriate. So, I was like, I said, we should do this. And she said, nah, and she sent me some links of information to look at. And it's heavy stuff. It's about the treaties. It's about what was done when and what our demands are, kind of thing. And it's like, how do I integrate that? So also one of the things that I found is some curriculum that the city, Portland Public Schools has for different grades. And this is in order for them to comply with Senate Bill 13, which is to help Native American children become better educated and give them more resources and provide them the adequate background information they need to honor their legacy. So PPS is not apparently doing that very well. So it may be something that also as a resource for us to look at some of that documentation to move forward. I'm all for scrapping this agenda if that's what you want to do, and back up and punt because I want this to be a broader discussion than just us four. And I also think opening this up to make sure that we have as many people as are interested from the community in our neighborhood to participate would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think educating ourselves with some of these issues are really important.
And it may be a matter of that we have these couple months of just educating ourselves, and the meetings don't really start up until whatever, but we could have study groups, that get together and say, this is what I've learned, and then go back and look at some other things. And it may start with a reading of the one book you're talking about, Me and White Supremacy, I think is what you said.
Yeah, that or White Supremacy and Me. And it was written by a woman of color, and it was never really meant to be published, and then she published it, and it's a workbook, and it's meant to be read and then journaled as you go along. And then at the end, it has, okay, now you can take some actions, and what can you do? And there's resources in the back of the book about what steps to take after that. So I think it's good because you learn about where you're at and where you need to grow, understand things, and before you jump into something feet first and then
right,
not be able to swim, I guess.
Tamara, I'd be really interested in the resources that you have that specifically address why it's a bad idea to not bad idea to honor the people who've inhabited the land, because I've not heard that before.
Well, it came from this principal that I interviewed.
No, I agree with that, but she also sent you some resources.
Yeah, it gave me some resources, and I can provide links of what I've got.
Okay, but I'm just really curious as to why that's bad. I mean, and I can ask you that. I wouldn't walk up to a person of Native American descent and say, tell me why it's a bad idea. That anyway, you know what I'm saying. I'm not that crazy, but right. I'm just really curious what the problem is.
I think part of that is to understand the meaning behind what a treaty is, and the meaning behind what actually was done, and at least go forward with an open heart and open mind in saying this. Otherwise, it's just you are parroting, a sense of decorum, and not necessarily doing an action of meaning. And so I think part of it is empty gestures are not welcome. That I understand that.
Okay, that's good to know. I wasn't thinking of it as an empty gesture, but and I also understand your point and how it may appear to be that way. So
Yes.
that's really helpful.
Okay. So at this point, why don't we share what resources we have and think are good with each other. And I will work on an article for the newsletter. What do you think about even having a resource list that we could put on the website? You know, that maybe that's not low hanging fruit. Maybe that needs to go through the board. I'm also, you know, I'm looking at, but it may be just those people that are interested that we can share this list or growing list of resources with. And then we could put people's names by it, that the folks that are reading different things, so then we can ask them questions. I'm just trying to figure out how we as a group, a forming group, can dabble in educating ourselves between now and then. Any ideas? Say we pick this back up in September after kids are back in school.
Yeah.
Or October.
So you're talking about publications, books, options for meeting or things that are already going on, perhaps?
Possibly. You know, I think self-education is the first step, and maybe this white supremacy and me workbook would be a first step for folks. I know that certain people in our board would, you know, who are belligerent and say, I'm not a white supremacist. I've never had any problem, you know, with race at all. I just don't know anybody who's not white. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be good. In the appendix of the book, she has something about working in groups, me and white supremacy book circles. And in the groups, they don't have a leader, it's a circle. So they say a leader in every chair. So, and then there's a description about it, and there's an organization that kind of helps define that.
And maybe that's where we should start.
Yeah.
I also shared the link of information that I got from Nextdoor, because as leads, they send out, they've got a whole section right now on talking about race and how to talk about race and your neighborhood. So I thought that was interesting, and it has a whole batch of connections and videos that you can play and understand a little bit from different people's perspective.
That's good.
Yeah, and I have links to various resources that have been put together. Like I have links to lists of resources that have been put together by, I can't remember if it was the Coalition of Communities of Color, but various different organizations. It's intended so that white people we can educate ourselves. So I've got a few of those different links of links, if that makes any sense. I just finished reading, let's see, White Fragility. I've got a couple of other books that I'm getting ready to take a look at too.
Yeah, I've finished reading that one recently too.
One of them is on the African-American banking system and how it was undermined. That's a a fairly new book that's just come out, and I forget what the other one's about, but
Is that one that's called Color of Law? The Color
No.
of Law.
no, Color of
Oh.
Law is more about real estate.
Okay.
That was
So
that's a good basic book also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm experiencing the phenomenon I experienced when they used to have video stores and libraries, and where my bandwidth gets overloaded really quickly, and then I just cease to function. And I'm wondering if maybe we pick so this circle, and I don't know, I had a list here, and this: me and white supremacy, combat racism, change the world, and become a good ancestor. If we were to pick one one source that would be the hub of our, if you want to call it exercise or process, that people sort of like everybody reads at the library, that concept that everybody's reading the same thing, and then they can also read all these other resources, but try to have a single source to hang the process on when, if we invite it, the neighbors in, to have everybody on the same, somewhat on the same page, and then they can have all this additional information. I guess that's my antidote to my bandwidth overload.
And I'm with you on that. I mean, that's why I didn't want to list out resources until we got a little more focused, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of them. The one that I did send, though, is directly relevant to Portland and Portland's history, and it's on the city's website itself. And so that's why I thought that one is not the kind of resource that Sherry is recommending, which I think is also good, which is more of a workbook for yourself and looking at your own attitudes and beliefs and things like that. This is more information. It's more informational and historical. It's also not a long thing to get through.
Yeah.
And so it's a good introduction and eye opener about kind of what goes on beneath our own feet.
Yeah, no, I agree, Andre. Tamara sent that out for one of our board meetings as a link. And I looked at it earlier, like a week or two ago, went on the website and looked at the, Laurelhurst, basically as a covenant and the maps. And so that would be I think that would be a good start to have people familiar with that to begin the conversation. I like that idea. I think it'd be good to have a central focus to launch off of, and that I'm fine with that.
Or Sherry's, or it's sort of like start here, then go here type thing. So it's more of a path than a.
So odds are we're going to be in a Zoom environment, and Zoom is actually what's the name of the circle thing? What's this? I don't know. Anyway, it kind of sets itself up for a circle because you've got all the folks in the gallery view, and although if there's not a sergeant at arms to kind of maintain order, it could get nutty, but it seems to lend itself to that type of a conversation. It's a
Book circle.
book circle. It's a digital circle, if you will. So I don't know, just throwing some ideas out there.
Mm-hmm.
So Tamara, are you thinking that you're going to write an article for the newsletter, and the suggestion would be that we'll have a ad hoc meeting on Zoom, or it'll be part of the general meeting, or are we expanding this committee?
I think, if we can start a book group, or a reflection on diversity reading circle, and that would start with those two items and say who's interested in joining us in going through this journey with us to see how we want to become anti-racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sponsored by the Rose City Park Neighborhood Association. So
Right.
it's not a direct function, but
Maybe people can report something back, or communicate back somehow to the neighborhood association. And at some point, I don't know exactly when, but at the end of the book, where you decide what you're going to do for action, or
Yeah, I think we need to self-educate before we again formulate what is our mission.
Yeah.
I feel like creating a mission before we even have all the information is fraught with problems. So maybe this would be the preparation for creating a committee. I don't know.
yeah.
What do you think?
Does there have to be a committee?
No.
And that's kind of why I was throwing out the sponsored by the neighborhood association, and it could be its own entity. I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
the idea was, at least my idea was, to help educate and grow self-awareness in the board and members of the neighborhood. So then they can help inform, that group could help inform the board of changes that need to be made. And if you have a separate group off doing their own thing, and then they come in and start sniping, that's not going to be functional.
Right. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
What's your thoughts, Andre, on how to proceed?
I'm wide open because I've not been involved in the neighborhood dynamics directly. And I mean, in this neighborhood, so.
Well, you know what a neighborhood association is, and how they function, and that we have a board, and we have 4 of us. Actually, 3 of us are voting members on the board. And then Lynn's the editor, and she doesn't live in the neighborhood, and we've got you. So the idea is enough of the board being in the group that we can report back and say, this is what's going on. And so there's two-way conversations going on, and education going on.
Well, I like your very concrete idea of saying, let's form a book circle, and it's wide open. Some of us are interested in reading these 2 resources, and and we'll see where it goes. I haven't read the book yet, so it's hard to know where it'll take us.
Right.
So I haven't actually looked at it, so I don't really have that, have that sense. But it's good that it's a workbook, and so that that would be a great place to start. And so let's just see if we can start with something as simple as a book circle. And I again don't want to be the person to organize and facilitate a book circle.
Well, me neither, but I feel like it's dirty laundry that needs to get washed.
I agree.
maybe somebody will step up, you know, who's really got a fire in the belly and ready to roll. You know, if we put the idea out there, I
How about
think.
your daughter?
She's
She
getting all kinds
she
of
doesn't live in the neighborhood.
Darn it.
getting requests already for many, you know, to run IIDA, to be director or whatever of that organization, and some other HOA for the building she lives in. So she might just be overwhelmed with that. But
It was a good try, Tamara. But
Young and has that book already read, so why not?
yeah, she's the one that got me into, you know, starting to educate myself. I thought I was woke, but I really wasn't.
Yeah. Well, to me, it's a daily process. And one of the things we can do is start a Google spreadsheet that has information on it of the different books and links and stuff like that. So we can share lists of information.
Sure.
How about that?
That sounds good.
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
so Tam and I neighborhood association, my experience, and I've expressed it many times, is that we're kind of a hot button people. Most people don't, and I'm trying to be positive about this. People engage when they have an issue that is affecting them directly, and then they tend to drift away. And I think that if we open this thing up, Lynn wants in, hang on. Those people who are interested will join and participate. Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
And I think that is a reality we can expect, is that, and then they're going to get different people are going to get different levels of value out of it. But, and as Sherry said, maybe a leader will emerge. There's most likely somebody in the neighborhood that's, you know, really enthused about this. And so I don't know that we have to pick a leader right away. I think it could be an organic process. I was grasping for a phrase there. And because we are a hot button organization, and this may be some people's hot button. Engender their enthusiasm and participation. So,
Well, Lynn, we've kind of trashed our agenda.
Okay, well, I glanced at it. I did not come well prepared. No, unfortunately I was not able to check my email until just late, and for whatever reason I went back and checked, and I for some reason did not get that invitation. So who knows?
Sorry.
That's all right. Stuff happens. Anyway, I wasn't here. I wasn't home. As I said, I just got home. So you want to give me that 5-minute catch up?
Thank you.
Wait.
We kind of introduced ourselves and then basically said, this is probably not the best time to try to get people together for this type of thing. It's, for me, it's I'm swamped, and it's the end of summer, and I'm trying to spend as much time in the sun and outside as possible. And that's not even work, you know. Whatever time I have available, I'm trying to get out. But I'm still also trying to catch up with all the work I've got. The other thing is, I know that Andre has given us a couple ideas of, you know, some 4 key points. One was Portland history, workbook for ourselves. Is that right?
That's okay. Don't worry about that. I think we've gone in a different direction, Tamara. And okay. I'm just let's just go to where we are now.
Okay. We're thinking more about creating a book circle for self-education. and opening it up to everyone in the neighborhood. And the top books would be the Portland history. And then also there's a workbook called White Supremacy and Me. And so getting people to first go through the Portland history and then stepping through the workbook together and having dialogue as a book group. And then moving forward and saying, okay, where do we go from there? And but starting that up almost immediately, you know, as much as possible, because we'd be putting information out in the newsletter. And that's not until October.
Well, we can do one sooner.
Okay. Because I'm all for reading. I read a lot every day, but I don't have much time to sit down with novels, you know?
Right. It's different things. Yeah.
It's a different thing.
Well, let me throw in a question there, and if I'm covering old ground, by all means, let me know. My first thought about that is, okay, that's good, but the problem that I see, and I don't like the word, but for lack of a better one, is that I think there's a risk that self-educating may not be seen by the target populations as doing anything more than running ourselves around in circles and continuing what's already wrong. Even though it's not, I'm saying from the opposite side, and a perception could be, okay, you don't need to read a book about this. You need to hear from the affected populations directly. And I don't have a good answer for that either, as you know, because we've talked about that before.
I think you're wrong.
Okay.
From what I've been hearing is that everyone wants, I mean, what I've heard from over and again is that self-education is the first step. And self-reflection.
I think being informed enough that you're not going into a conversation with other people without at least a groundwork in what the history is and has been.
Exactly.
Sure.
So, and who you are in time and place, and what your privilege has been, and doing kind of a self-inventory.
Okay.
So that you have your homework done, basically your house cleaned, before you step out and say, okay, I think I can help lead this conversation or work with this conversation.
Okay.
And I think having or building that capacity is the first step, because frankly, if you don't know what the words are, if you don't have a grasp on the concepts of where you came from and how your family ended up with the VA loan or whatever else there is, or not, and how that gave you certain privilege in your life.
So talking about what entitlement means and when the practical effect of it, whether you recognize it in yourself or not.
Right.
Okay. All right.
And the idea is that you don't have necessarily people talking down to you saying, you need to learn this. It's a self-reflection time of saying, okay, I didn't know this about my family. I'm just growing up, and I've been taught nothing about the Native American community, where I grew up in East Tennessee, and they eradicated folks through the Trail of Tears, you know?
Yep.
And one of my best friends is the spokesperson for the Cherokee in the Northwest here.
Which group?
She went on a bus ride last year that followed the Trail of Tears.
Yes, I know about it.
And her great grandmother walked that pregnant. Okay, and that's why she's here today.
Is she with Mount Hood Cherokees?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been around them quite a bit.
Yeah. Anyway,
my guy is a tribal member.
Okay, good.
Yeah, well, because I mean, here's one for you. On one side of my family, I have Seneca and Lakota Sioux heritage, and on the other side, I have slave owners.
Well.
Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, and that, you know, my first wife was 1/4 Cherokee. So it's just, and I thought I had Cherokee Iroquois in me for the longest time until I did the blood test and then found out I had no Native American in me, and that was like 3 years ago. And I'm like, ah! And I'd already spent, you know, 3 years by that time working with Native People Circle of Hope. So I'm a good ally, you know, but I.
Yeah. You do know that a negative Native American DNA test is not necessarily meaningful because the database of Native Americans is so small that it's very, very hard to match.
Well, also they often come up as Asian.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't have any Asian in my body.
Sometimes
Bring to them.
we get some genes from our parents and not others, and I don't know if it splits, you know, along heritage lines, but I don't know.
Well, I was the one that was born with black hair, very brown eyes, and tanner skin than anyone else. So.
Yeah, I've heard that you can take like you can take the 23andMe and you can take the ancestry, you can take the heritage and the other ones, and you can end up with very disparate results from them because of their databases being so different.
Interesting.
Yeah. I've been
Okay,
looking at.
can we get back on task here?
Sure.
Yeah, it's past
sorry.
8 o'clock and
My right brain is really strong.
brain is going. So anyway, I'm going to write an article, and if we do a newsletter before October, it would be in that one.
I think we can plan to do that. We'll just
Okay.
set a time. I'm thinking probably we're at the middle of August, so maybe after the end of Labor Day week, that kind of around the 8th, 10th sort of timing.
Okay. All right.
And we'll put in it whatever we have to put in it and not look for special things, but just to make a point that it's we can call it a special or whatever.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay.
How about that for a start, folks?
Yeah.
So we're going to have the letter, and the content will be that we're going to begin a book circle, and here are 2 resources that the Portland website and what was the other one? Me and White.
Me and white supremacy.
Me and White Supremacy.
One of the actions, she says in the end of the book, seek out anti-racist educators and teachers. Attend their classes, courses, workshops, and events. Self-reflecting is important, but it is not enough. Put yourself in spaces where you can learn directly from anti-racist educators. So maybe, you know, down the line, invite some people to come to the meeting, to the general meetings, maybe on that issue.
I like that.
Okay.
All right.
So when do we think we want to do some version of this again, if ever?
Well, given that we're all just taxed, I think we need to get the newsletter out and then get feedback, and then we can start as a book group. But I think those are the 2 books that I would recommend all of us take on and to read. And
we want to pick a start date for the book group, just and it could be in the newsletter. At there's going to be a Zoom meeting, an initial circle meeting on October this or on November that, or
well,
I don't think we should
get
wait
it
that
on
long.
out on what, September 6th.
Well, we could get it sooner if you want to. I mean, we could start pulling it together now to have it out before the end of the
I'm
month.
talking about the meeting, so we have something concrete.
I don't think we should. I think that's too far out, Ed. If we're gonna tackle this while things are fresh, I think we need to do it sooner than later.
Well, you also need to, you know, summer people are going to drag into September. If we have a nice September, they're still going to be outdoors. And school will be starting for parents. Well, you know, it's just.
I think September 15th.
September 15th.
I think,
Okay.
yeah, as long as after Labor Day week, I think probably makes sense. So somewhere in there sounds decent.
Sure. And we can just create a Zoom meeting and put it on the website and way ahead, and it can be in the newsletter,
And September
or,
15th,
just direct people to the website. That's where the invite will be.
September
Yeah.
15th is a Tuesday.
It is.
Do we have a meeting on September 15th? We don't have a board meeting. We don't have a land.
Well, the board meeting is the first,
Okay.
Land use is on the 17th.
right? I think
All
that's it. And then whatever, well, whatever other things there might be. I don't think we have anything else. So let me quick look at my calendar.
I'll create
don't
the meeting as soon as we're
see
done
anything.
here, just so it's in the oven.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is going to be a book group meeting happening really soon after the newsletter is coming out. Is that right?
That is correct.
Do we want people to have done some of that homework before they show up?
You can suggest it, but I don't think you should exclude people if they haven't done it.
I think
Okay.
listening in is an important part.
Yeah. They might want to
Well-
get a sense of the tenor of the activity and whether it's something you want to engage or,
Right.
I mean, they might be turned off by, well, I have to invest this. And then if it's not worth my while, they can be a little torqued about it.
Well,
Right.
they don't do it then.
Right. That's why they could, but, okay. You're right, but they still might be a little torqued that they invested time for something that they aren't interested in. But there may be people who are going to put the time in. We want to exclude the ones who just want to
Hang out.
put their toe in the water.
Yeah. Or the ones that want to show up and just bitch.
Right.
Well,
I don't.
you can always mute them. I have the control.
That is good. That's a good thing about Zoom. You can mute
That's
them.
true.
Yeah,
Leave the meeting.
I mean, that's, right away at the beginning, you say, we want this to be positive dialogue.
Yeah.
And
like
and if you're interpreted as not being positive and wanting to be a contributor to this effort, then you're not going to be allowed to participate.
Well, I think we can put all that in the newsletter article. I mean, enough to give people the gist of where we are and where we think we want to be going.
It could even be a one-pager, Lynn, just kind of a special edition.
Yeah, I've actually got one other thing that I need to put in there that it inadvertently got omitted from the summer one, which was the which I promised I would get in the next one. So
Oh, was it the thing about the thing for the Episcopal Church?
the blue sky.
I noticed it wasn't in there.
Yep, he followed up. He said, "I haven't seen the newsletter, but was it in there?" And I went back going, "Oh my god!" And I know what happened. It just got in the shuffle at that last minute to try to make sure there were things, but it was like, "Oops!" I got set aside and not reintegrated. So anyway,
Okay.
he and I've had a nice dialogue. So
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, can I just say one thing before we end?
Yes, please.
Just really quickly, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for letting me be, part of this. I know the meeting on the 15th will be a night meeting, and that's just, so I'm going to be doing the reading on my own, but I probably won't be participating in night meeting discussions. And I'm okay with that. And I'm interested in seeing the resources and following what's going on. And I don't want to preclude anyone else, but
And it may be that this is the only night meeting one, it's just initial one. And then maybe 10 o'clock on Saturdays is the best time for the group. I don't know.
or that maybe we alternate them so they're different days, different times, so that more people can be participatory, even if not every time.
Right.
that all sounds good to me. I just didn't want anyone to think I'm taking my, let's see, what is it, basketball and going home, or taking my whatever, going home. Because that's not the intention here. It's just, it's just my own boundaries.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to get access to some of those resources you have. So please share away.
I will indeed. How about, Tamara, should I share them with you directly, and then you can share them beyond if you think that they're interesting?
What I can do is once you share them, I can start up a Google spreadsheet for the group. Okay,
That's a good
great.
idea.
And that way anyone can access it at any time.
I will also talk with my coworker we had like a 5-minute conversation day before yesterday when she told me that she was doing all this other stuff, and it sounds like she's a wealth of information. So I will try to connect with her maybe over the weekend or early next week. So I've got
Okay,
more
very
input
good.
from her.
All right, thank you, everyone.